Chapter 1. The moment everything changes, the monk hadn't spoken in 12 years. Every morning before sunrise, he sat on the same weathered stone overlooking a valley swallowed by mist. His breathing was almost impossible to detect. Birds landed within arm's reach without fear. Time itself seemed reluctant to disturb him. Then, one morning, everything changed. His spine straightened with startling precision. His eyes opened. Witnesses later described an almost indescribable stillness, as if the silence itself had become alive. One disciple would later write that simply standing near him felt like standing beneath a waterfall of invisible energy. Another insisted nothing supernatural had happened at all. Perhaps it was simply the culmination of decades of disciplined meditation. Or perhaps something hidden inside every human being had awakened. For thousands of years, seekers have spoken about an invisible force called Kundalini, a dormant energy believed to rest at the base of the spine, waiting for the right conditions to rise. Some call it humanity's greatest spiritual potential. Others call it one of the most misunderstood ideas ever created. And somewhere between myth, psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience stands a rare figure, the Kundalini soul monk. Not simply a monk, not merely a meditator, but someone whose entire existence revolves around awakening consciousness itself. The question is, what actually happens when someone dedicates an entire lifetime to awakening? And what if the greatest journey isn't across the world, but through the hidden landscape of the human mind? Chapter 2. The secret sleeping at the base of the spine. Imagine carrying the greatest source of transformation inside your own body without ever realizing it exists. That is the central idea behind Kundalini. Ancient yogic traditions describe Kundalini as a coiled serpent resting quietly at the base of the spine. The image isn't meant to describe anatomy. It's a symbol, potential waiting to awaken. The earliest references appear in ancient Indian spiritual literature, particularly later Upanishads and Tantric traditions, where Kundalini represents dormant spiritual power rather than physical energy alone. These texts describe practices intended to cultivate concentration, ethical discipline, breath control, and meditation before attempting any profound inner transformation. According to these traditions, awakening is not about gaining supernatural abilities. It is about dissolving the illusion of separation. The goal is not power, the goal is freedom. But why portray this force as a serpent? Across civilizations, serpents have symbolized transformation. They shed their skin, disappear underground, return renewed. Ancient Egypt, Mesoamerica, again and again, the serpent becomes a universal metaphor for rebirth. Yet in Kundalini teachings, the serpent does not move outward. It rises inward. From survival toward awareness, from instinct toward wisdom. But if this journey is so profound, why did so many traditions insist that only the most disciplined practitioners should attempt it? Chapter 3. Why monks spend decades preparing. Contrary to popular imagination, Kundalini traditions rarely begin with energy. They begin with character. Long before meditation becomes deep, long before mystical experiences, comes discipline. The Kundalini soul monk trains the mind before attempting to transform consciousness. Days are structured with astonishing precision. Before dawn, meditation, breath practices, silence, study, simple meals, little sleep, even fewer distractions. To outsiders, such routines may appear repetitive. To practitioners, repetition becomes refinement, each distraction noticed, each emotional reaction observed, each attachment slowly loosened. Modern neuroscience offers an interesting parallel. Research consistently shows that long-term meditation can influence attention, emotional regulation, stress response, and patterns of brain activity. Studies involving experienced meditators have identified measurable differences in neural networks related to awareness and self-referential thinking. These findings do not confirm claims about Kundalini energy itself, but they do suggest that disciplined contemplative practice can profoundly shape the human mind. Perhaps the ancient teachers understood something important. Even if they described it using symbolic language, still, not every awakening is peaceful. Some seekers describe overwhelming psychological and physical experiences that have become known as Kundalini syndrome. Are these genuine spiritual transformations, psychological crises, or something far more complicated? Chapter 4: When Awakening Becomes a Storm. One woman described it as lightning racing through her spine. Another said she suddenly perceived reality as overwhelmingly vivid. Others reported intense heat, involuntary movements, powerful emotions, altered perceptions, or periods of profound fear and confusion. These reports have appeared in spiritual autobiographies, clinical discussions, and interviews with meditation practitioners across several decades. Researchers have debated these experiences extensively. Some psychologists interpret them as altered states emerging from intensive contemplative practice. Some clinicians warn that similar symptoms can overlap with anxiety disorders, trauma responses, or certain psychiatric conditions. Spiritual teachers often caution that dramatic experiences are not the goal of practice, and that guidance, preparation, and discernment are essential. The evidence remains mixed. What is clear is this: extraordinary inner experiences deserve thoughtful interpretation rather than immediate certainty. For the Kundalini soul monk, these moments are not celebrated. They're observed, no visions, no voices. No sensations matter unless they cultivate greater compassion, wisdom, and balance. Because awakening, according to many traditions, is measured not by unusual experiences, but by how one lives afterward. Which raises another question: if enlightenment cannot be measured by visions, how can anyone recognize genuine awakening? Chapter 5: The Invisible Signs of an Awakened Soul. The answer may be unexpectedly ordinary. Many respected spiritual traditions describe awakened individuals not by supernatural feats, but by consistent qualities: deep patience, more curiosity, humility, compassion, equanimity, freedom from compulsive fear and craving. Rather than becoming extraordinary, they become profoundly human. Historical accounts of contemplatives across Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, Christian, and Sufi traditions often describe similar transformations despite very different beliefs: less ego, more service; less certainty, more curiosity. Some neuroscientists studying advanced meditators have suggested that long-term practice may reduce habitual self-focused mental activity, allowing practitioners to experience a greater sense of interconnectedness. Whether this represents spirituality, brain adaptation, or both remains an open question. Yet something remarkable appears repeatedly. People who dedicate decades to disciplined contemplative practice often describe becoming less interested in changing the world and more interested in changing themselves. Ironically, many end up transforming countless lives around them. But how does one spend decades pursuing something invisible? Chapter 6: Inside the Life of a Kundalini Soul Monk. The day begins before light. No alarm, only rhythm. A small bell echoes through stone corridors. Bare feet touch cool ground. Silence becomes the first teacher. Hours pass without conversation. Each breath becomes an object of study. Each thought, another wave passing across awareness. Meals are simple. The monk protects it fiercely: rice, vegetables, water, nothing extravagant, nothing excessive. Possessions fit inside a small room. Not because simplicity is fashionable, but because every unnecessary object demands attention. Attention is precious. The monk protects it fiercely. Visitors often arrive hoping to witness miracles. Instead, they encounter quiet. Questions receive unexpected answers. Sometimes no answer at all. One disciple once asked, "What is enlightenment?" The teacher simply smiled and poured tea. When the cup overflowed, he kept pouring. Only after tea spilled across the table did he stop. The lesson required no explanation. A full mind cannot receive anything new. Perhaps awakening begins not by adding knowledge, but by emptying certainty. Yet if letting go is the key, why do humans cling so tightly to identity? Chapter 7. The greatest battle isn't against the world, it is against ourselves. Modern psychology increasingly recognizes how strongly identity shapes perception. We protect beliefs, defend stories, repeat habits, build entire lives around ideas of who we think we are. Ancient contemplative traditions noticed the same tendency thousands of years earlier, only they called it the ego. Not as an enemy, but as a useful tool that becomes problematic when mistaken for the whole of who we are. The Kundalini soul monk trains relentlessly to witness thoughts without becoming trapped by them. Imagine watching clouds cross the sky. You notice them, but you do not become them. Meditation in this sense becomes less about escaping reality and more about seeing it clearly. This perspective echoes ideas found in contemporary mindfulness research, though different traditions interpret the experience through different philosophical lenses. Some describe neurological processes, others describe spiritual awakening. Perhaps these explanations compete, perhaps they complement one another. No one knows with certainty, and maybe certainty was never the point. Chapter 8. What if the real awakening is already happening? Throughout history, every civilization has searched for hidden treasure, lost cities, sacred relics, secret knowledge. The Kundalini soul monk searches for something stranger, the observer behind every thought, the awareness beneath every emotion, the stillness beneath every moment. Whether Kundalini is understood as symbolic psychology, profound contemplative transformation, or a spiritual reality beyond current scientific explanation, one truth emerges across traditions. Lasting transformation appears to require discipline, humility, patience, and ethical living, not shortcuts, not spectacle. The greatest mysteries often unfold quietly, not on mountaintops, not inside ancient temples, but in ordinary moments when a person notices a thought and chooses not to follow it when anger arises and compassion answers instead. When fear appears and awareness remains, perhaps awakening is not a destination reached by a chosen few. Perhaps it is an invitation available every moment to become a little more conscious than we were yesterday. The monk on the mountain may never reveal what happened during that silent morning. Maybe words were never capable of explaining it. Or maybe the mystery survives because it asks each generation the same question. If there truly is dormant potential within every human being, what might awaken if we finally became still enough to listen? And perhaps the most important question remains unanswered, not whether Kundalini exists, but whether we are willing to begin the inner journey that generations of seekers believed was waiting all along.